to Jewish Women Talk About Midlife. Hi, I'm Devora Krasnianski, and I've been coaching women for a long time in all areas of life, including women in midlife. Midlife is an exciting time, but it's also confusing, and so I invite experts to join me here as we unpack this crazy and interesting time of our lives. You can find us on our website, jewishmidlife.com, and follow us on Jewish Midlife on Instagram or Facebook, and join our conversations in our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Jewish Women Talk About Midlife. Midlife is an exhilarating phase in our lives where we've accumulated diverse experiences and created our own unique paths, be it through family, career, or personal interests. It's a time when many of us feel compelled to give back to others. Interestingly, studies indicate that we are inherently inclined to contribute during this midlife stage. Recently, I had the pleasure of talking to Dr. Deborah Heiser of the Mentor Project, who shared insightful perspectives on various avenues for giving back, such as philanthropy, volunteering, and mentoring. Mentoring in particular presents an exciting opportunity to assist others by sharing our wisdom, experiences, and passions. Debbie spoke about her mentor project and about different ways that we can become mentors. Our conversation delved into the broader benefits of midlife and more specifically, the transformative impact of mentoring others. Is a great conversation. Considering your own journey, how would you like to give back? Enjoy the episode. So, good evening, everybody. I'm Devora Krasnianski from Jewish Women Talk About Midlife, and today we have a really exciting conversation about midlife being the perfect time for new beginnings. And today I have Dr. Debbie Heiser. Dr. Debbie, why don't you talk about all the work that you're doing? You do so many interesting things in all areas, but specifically about midlife. So thank you so much for joining me today about this important topic of midlife.
Thank you for having me. And I am just so impressed with you and all the work you do. So it's a real pleasure to be on here with you. I'm an applied developmental psychologist, but I focus on the things that we have to look forward to as we get older. I focus on midlife and beyond. And I write for Psychology Today. I have my own blog, which is The Right Side of 40. And I also am the CEO and founder of the Mentor Project, where we bring folks who have already gotten their expertise. Usually that's a midlifer and beyond, and they want to give it back. And so we're a mentor-focused mentoring organization where world-class experts give back to the younger folks for free. And I also teach at SUNY Old Westbury University, which is in New York. So I do a few, and I see clients as well. So I do a few different things, but my main focus is midlife and beyond.
Right. And we had some really great conversations before this talk about midlife. So I'm really excited about what you're doing. I think the mentoring program is really interesting. So I hope that we get to cover that as well. And you have just so many interesting articles. So I want to talk about some of those things in our time that we have together. So let's just go. We call this midlife as the perfect time for new beginnings. But why is midlife the perfect time? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. This gets me so excited because there's so much to look forward to. When we hit midlife, we know who we are. You know, when most of us think of getting older, we don't think of getting happier. We also don't think of feeling better about ourselves. But think back to when you're young and you're wondering, what am I going to be in the future? Who am I going to be? And you're sort of figuring yourself out. That's a time often of hope, but anxiety also. By the time we hit midlife, we know who our friends are. We tend to know who we are. We know what our identity is. And there's a lot of power in that, partly because we've shed the superficial friendships that don't have as much meaning for us. And we stick with people who fewer but closer relationships, those that mean something to us and that matter. So midlife is a time of really developing ourselves a lot more. And that brings us a lot of satisfaction, a lot of pleasure. That's one of the main things that I like to talk about with regard to midlife. Another thing that we have in midlife that's a really big thing is our emotional growth. So when we're hitting midlife, this is the time when we move to becoming more happy. At 50, you can expect to be happier than when you were 20 and 30 and 40. And that grows as we get older. The reason for that is partly because we know who we are and we know how to navigate frustrating circumstances. We've sort of learned how to deal with others in our lives. So we're expanding on our emotional growth. The things that we're feeling and thinking about things are wiser things that aren't rash decisions, impulsive thinking. We often don't bring it back to ourselves negatively. We're able to say, I know who I am. I'm going to say what I want to say, and I'm going to be who I am. And that's a real pleasure in midlife to get to that point. We also are much more productive. I mean, look at yourself, Deborah. You're so productive right now, and you're talking about midlife. This is super important for most of us. More entrepreneurs start out at 60 and have successful startups. We have a lot of women who say, hey, I've raised my kids. I'm going to go out and I'm going to do something for me. I'm going to start something up. We are really productive, and whatever it is that we're doing, we're getting there in midlife. This is the time when we actually get to appreciate our productivity. If you think about it, when you're studying in school, I don't know how many people appreciate that. But when you're in midlife, you're able to appreciate the things that you're doing. When you're raising kids, yes, you appreciate that. But it's a different kind of appreciation when you're doing something that you've always been passionate about beyond raising children and, doing whatever else it is that you've been doing, because those are obligations that are meaningful, but they may not tie with maybe a passion project that we have. So at midlife, we also become generative. We all have skills, we have talents, we have things that we've amassed, and it's our time that we get to choose our legacy and how we want to give that back. And this is the time that we get to say, what's the mark that I want to leave on the world? So, Deborah, you're saying, I want to make sure that the next generations can talk about menopause and talk about midlife and all of that. That's an incredible footprint to leave. It's an incredible thing to be able to put out. You live on in that. And that's part of what we all strive to do in midlife. And we get a lot of fulfillment from it.
I think to some degree, some of the harder work of setting ourselves up in life is kind of set up already, like finding our careers, finding the work that we'd like to do, and our families, and setting ourselves up in our social communities and whatever else. That's kind of done. And even if we end up physically moving to another place, and which is hard in itself, but we know who we are, and we take ourselves from the old place to the new place. So I like this this new stage, whether it's new and different, but it's wonderful. And I'm not making dinners for whole families, and I'm not doing homework anymore, and I'm not doing all those things that did bring me joy. I did enjoy doing homework most of the time, but now I have a lot more time to work on things that are more interesting to me than homework. Like
yes. Telling somebody to do something or ordering them around isn't mentoring. It's opening a door, and you can open a door by showing somebody a value.
7th grade algebra I personally liked it, but when it came to writing or editing essays, it wasn't as much fun.
Yes, we're expected to love our children, and we're expected to want to help them and to do things, and the homework, all of that is joyful. I loved every aspect of raising my kids. I loved the night showing somebody what you mean, the staying up, the everything. But there's something that's really pleasurable about doing something that you say, wow, I can put something out in the world that's me. And that's really pleasurable in midlife. It doesn't matter what it is. If you say, I'm going to go and I'm going to do handicrafts, that is important. And whatever it is that's important to you, it's you. And that's what's so exciting and fulfilling to us in midlife.
So I want to talk a little bit more about this generative leaving a legacy. There's so many different ways that we could do it. Can we talk a little bit about some of the things that someone can think about? Whether it's like, I enjoy sharing knowledge and just making a space for people to be able to talk about these kind of things. And I enjoy helping people live their best life. That's me. But and there's a world of people, and there's a world of different things, but sometimes we need some ideas of what we can be doing. Let's talk to that.
Sure. So I first wanted to sort of define generative. It's talked about because Erik Erikson, a developmental psychologist, had a theory that, when you hit he had a whole set of stages that he theorized that we go through in our lifespan, starting from birth all the way through death. And in midlife, the theory is that you become generative and you want to give back. You have the space to do it, you have the bandwidth, and you want to make your mark on the world, leave a legacy. So, what that means is that you're generating something. Most people think of it as generosity, and there's a difference. Generosity is not being generative. Being generous is when you go to an ice cream parlor and they give you an extra scoop of ice cream. That's nice and we love that, but as soon as we eat it, it's gone. But when you put your word out to others, when you speak about topics, it lives on. There's going to be a video. You're telling somebody else, they're going to tell someone else. An example of that, and then I'll give a couple of examples of what people can do, is the Nobel laureate in chemistry in 2012, Bob Lefkowitz. He said, and leave it to a Nobel Prize winner to make a legacy tree. He drew it and then published it in a peer-reviewed journal. He was showing who his mentors were and who he mentored. And somebody came to him at a conference and said, "Hey, Bob, I'm 6th-degree Lefkowitz." And he started talking about the work that he was doing, and Bob was able to hear that in what this person was saying. It brought him such pleasure to know that what he had talked about was absorbed by someone and made it 6 levels down from him. Now, most of us don't know what happens after we say something to someone, but we know that there is a legacy tree that does last and it carries it on. That's generative. So the difference between generosity, being kind and doing something nice for others, that's great. But being generative is when you're putting something out in the world that lives on in others. So if that's cooking, if it's passing on values, this is how religion gets passed down for centuries, it's because of generativity. It could be any kind of work that you do, a skill, an expertise, a talent, whether that's arts, any kind of specialty that you might have at all. Even it could be parenting. It could be in terms of that you're able to, help others to learn how to parent, those kinds of things. We often think it has to be like accounting or lawyer or some kind of a skill like that, a profession, but it's not. It's anything at all. It could be values, whatever your expertise is.
And you can also develop new expertise also, or get
Yes.
into new space also. Like if you have a calling to something, but you haven't necessarily done it yet, you can also bring yourself to learn it and share it at the same time.
Absolutely. The difference in midlife is that, and the reason it's easier for us to do that. So maybe you hadn't done podcasting in the past, but you knew enough and had gotten enough expertise to know how to communicate with others and to build a community and to do all of these things and to say, all right, I'll figure this out. When we hit midlife, we're drawing from so many areas that we've already developed and honed, that when we start something new, we're not starting from scratch.
Totally. And I think that's what's so wonderful about midlife, is you can actually look back and see, oh, I learned this from this experience and that from that experience, and let me bring it into something new, or bring it into some sort of different combination and do something with it. Or of course, you could just take that one thing. If someone is an accountant and they can do pro bono work, or they can teach someone how to organize themselves, whether it's, anybody, or as someone who's starting a new business, or someone in lower income, so that as they start pro bono for a nonprofit, or there's just a million different ways. That's specifically using the accounting experience you already have. There's so many other ways also. Like I think when we become more intentional about how we could be generative, I love the word, how we could be, then we all of a sudden find different ways that we could do it.
And the word intentional is key. You're completely right, because we are generative all the time and we don't even know it. We just do it naturally. But when we do it with intention, it makes us do it longer. It makes us better at it. And it makes us really get a lot of feel the benefits of doing it. Anytime we do anything that's just rote, we don't get any of the benefits of it. But as soon as we do something with intention, we're able to feel the good feelings from it. It dissipates more quickly if we're not intentional about it.
Right. I also find when we're intentional that we can actually set time for it and we actually think about it in bigger ways. How can I really do this? Where can I really put that into my life or to the lives of whoever I'm helping? Or how can I really make it more lasting if it's values instead of just kind of serendipitously the values are coming through to them, but actually think about what I want to give to the kids on a holiday so that they could actually remember rather than just kind of do it, but like be a little bit more intentional. I think it makes a lasting impression on the other person as well, of course, depending what it is.
Yes, what you just said is so true, and you said it well. When we are intentional in giving something to someone, they're more receptive to it and to taking it. So it's like if you pass something along, sometimes somebody will catch it or they won't. But if you're intentional and you're looking to pass something to someone, they're likely to catch it. And that's what happens, when we're trying to be generative as well. So you're right. It's better received when we are intentional because we're looking at someone or something and saying, here, I have this for you. And they're able to say, yes, thank you. I'm going to take that.
So I think that kind of leads us into the program that you do, the Mentor Project, because when we talked about the different kinds of ways of being generative or the different ways of using our time, and you talked about how one of the best ways is mentoring. So let's talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. Just so you know, there are three ways and mentoring is just one of them. One is volunteering, one is mentoring, and one is philanthropy. So any of those three areas are generative. But mentoring, I chose to focus on because it's free and because it's a piece of us that we're giving to somebody else, as opposed to volunteering where it's somebody else's thing and we're putting in, and it may not be our own expertise that we're giving back to somebody else. So the Mentor Project was formed because there were some really amazing individuals. Bob Cousins, who is the guy who patented how we use credit cards on the internet, and Bill Cheswick is one of the fathers of the internet firewall. So every time you shop and you use a credit card online, say thank you to Bob. These guys did some amazing things, and they couldn't find people to mentor. They kind of their kids were grown. They lived in a place where, who were they going to meet up with? They couldn't go to a park and say, hey, kids, do you want to learn about quantum mechanics? It was just not going to work.
Right.
So we found out that there was a real problem for people who were midlife and beyond to appropriately give back through mentorship because they were high level enough that they weren't around young people, and they weren't in corporate settings. They were just having a tough time. So we started it and went into schools. We started in New York and New Jersey, and the kids loved it and the mentors loved it. So we branched out. Now we have about 100 people who volunteer their time with us for free. People like astronauts, astrophysicists, 5-time Nobel laureate nominee for Middle East peace, you name it. We have people. And I was told early on that no one would want to do this. So I thought, really? They said, nobody's going to want to give back their time for free. That's crazy. But we have a waiting list now. We have over 100 mentors. And so people really do get a lot from giving back. And every one of the mentors asks for more time to do it. They ask for more opportunities. They get a lot out of it. And so it's just a real clear classic example of how generativity works. And that's what our organization does. We've impacted about 100,000 students in 7 countries just with, mentors giving, their time in whatever way they can. So the interesting thing is, we also found out about lateral mentoring. And I think that in midlife, this is something that's perfect for people to hear about. So I don't know if you're interested in me telling about lateral mentoring, but I can.
I think it's really important piece, but I just want to go back to a second for the difference between volunteering and mentoring, because the mentor is volunteering their time, but it's a different way than volunteering like at a community event and you're coming to volunteer to cut the vegetables or to be the usher at, it's very different, a mentor and a volunteer.
Yes.
I want to rehash that a little.
Sure. So I'll give examples of all three. So Yes, I went into my kids' school and I would cut the vegetables in their school. I did that for the events. And I got great pleasure out of that. I was helping, I got to see my kids. It made me feel good. It's very different than when you're doing something that comes from you. That was somebody who asked me, "Can you cut the vegetables? We need a vegetable cutter." Right? So there's the difference. One is coming from me, and one is me responding to somebody else's need. So that is, they're both important. And some people say, "Hey, I want to volunteer." And that's where they want to go for their generativity. With mentoring, it's that I have some expertise that I have a burning desire to get out with others. That's where I might say, I'm going to help young people enter the workforce and I'm going to open doors for them and I'm going to help them in that way. It's a little bit more abstract than if I were a docent at a zoo or if I went to a school and volunteered or did things like that. So it's more internally coming from you. You're the driver of it when you're mentoring.
So just why would someone mentor rather than charge for their time or for their
People
expertise?
do. Those are coaches. So I mentor, but I also coach. I see clients and I charge them. But I also mentor. When I'm mentoring, though, it's a little bit different. I'm giving my expertise to people who I feel, you know, would I be able to open a door for them in a different way? When I'm coaching somebody, it's someone who's hiring me and saying, "I want you for this amount of time," and it's really about them. They're the driver in that sense.
So when we're mentoring, we're giving from ourselves of whatever it is that we want to be giving to the world, as opposed to when someone's a coach or hiring me, it's like they're, as a client, they're telling you what they would like. And so that's okay. So that's an important distinction, I think.
Yes, and the difference also is pay. If somebody pays me to volunteer, I'm not volunteering. I'll give an example. How many people do you know would volunteer at a soup kitchen? And I give this question to my students all the time. And every semester, all of them raise their hand, or almost all. They say, "Yes, I would." And then I say, "Isn't that a nice feeling? What do you get out of it?" And they say, "Well, of course we feel great. We're helping out people in need. We're doing something kind. We're being a part of the community." And then I say, "Okay, how many of you would go to Starbucks and go behind the counter for no pay and give out food and beverages to people?" And they all say, "Not me." And I say, "But you're making hungry and thirsty people so happy in the morning. Why wouldn't you just do that for free and just not get a paycheck?" That's the difference, if that helps to make the difference between the two. So a person getting paid at Starbucks is like the coach. The person that is, if that makes the sense, it makes more sense.
Okay. So the idea of mentoring is we're helping somebody else move forward in whatever they're trying to do. That's
Yes.
more specific what mentoring as opposed to giving over our values just for value's sake.
Mentor, that is still values. So an example is religion has been passed down for centuries, and that's a value, right? And it's a belief. And that, why is it that every year my Thanksgiving looks the same? Why is it that my Passover looks the same? Why is it that we eat the same food every year? That gets passed down. That's a value. That's part of mentoring. That's part of bringing that through. That's a value set. So that should never be underestimated, the power of that. What kind of feelings do you get when you go to, some kind of a family ritual? There's a sense of comfort. There's a sense of, grounding, all of those things. Those are powerful and those are important. And those make us feel connected to others. So, you can be an accountant passing something down, but you can also be someone who's passing things down that are, the rituals, the morals, the values, and the beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
That's still mentoring.
Okay. So now let's talk about lateral mentoring, because I think that what we were describing till now is more like us knowing and sharing, I guess, downward. It's more vertical. But what are we talking about lateral? What are we talking about?
Lateral mentoring is the most powerful form of mentoring. And it's the one that we're doing all the time and we never even realize it. So if you simply look left and you look right, you're looking at a mentor. And so some of the examples that I give are um, a, a guy, Steve, is at work, and he um, can't figure out what to do at work. He hit a wall. He did what he's supposed to do. He's an engineer, but he can't finish the job. He just doesn't know what to do. His boss comes in and he says, "Hey, Steve, how's this going?" And Steve says, "It's fine. Don't worry about it. I got it." But he doesn't. So Steve calls his friend Steve and he says, "Steve, I don't know what I'm doing. The boss thinks I know what I'm doing, but I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help me out?" And Steve says, "Sure, I'll come by after work and I'll give you a hand. Let me take a look. Maybe I can help." So Steve comes into Steve's office after work and he takes a look and he says, "I think I can help you out here." He does some work. The next morning, the boss says, "Wow, Steve, you did some extra work. Great. It's getting there." And Steve said, "I told you." So then the boss comes back a few days later. Steve had been coming after work for a few days and the job's really getting done quickly. Finally, the job is done in before the due date. Steve was a lateral mentor to Steve. So Steve was Steve Jobs. This is a real example. Al Alcorn was his boss. Steve Jobs was at his job, and Al was asking him to make Breakout, the first video game from Atari, and Steve didn't know what to do. So he called his friend Steve Wozniak, who knew the different aspect of engineering that Steve Jobs didn't know. And he went in and helped him and showed him how and made it work. Mm-hmm. Now, how many times have you called in a friend to help you out? That is when we're lateral mentoring. And those are all, when we think about big companies or big ideas that have happened, Bill Cheswick, the network firewall father, he had help from Steve Bellevin to create it. It turned into a book later. Pretty much anything that we think of that we've done has had a lateral mentor involved, someone who's added to what we're doing, that it wouldn't have been right if it wasn't with a person helping us. And we have also helped others in times when somebody wouldn't have been able to get their work done. I don't know if you can think of an example for yourself where you might have been in that position where you were a lateral mentor or someone else helped you.
Oh, I mean, I think it's always, but I think one of the things that what I'm hearing is also to ask. We don't have to figure it out on our own. And I think that's something wonderful about midlife is that we recognize that everyone brings something and we don't have to figure it out on our own. But still, some people are just not yet into that, of really going out and asking and finding a mentor.
Here's how you do it. Yes, you're right. One way that helps to break the ice is you go mentor somebody else. So what I tell people to do is look around the room and identify people, and not just the room, but wherever. Oh, this person has a skill here. That's interesting. I don't know how to do that. Oh, this person has a skill or a talent. Oh, this one does. This one does. Wow. And then you can also say to yourself, this person can't do what I can do. This person can't do what I can do. When you are able to look around and read the room in that way, it's sometimes easier to say, you know what, I'd be able to help somebody else out. I can say to them, I see that I might be able to add something to what you're doing. Would you like some help? And that can break the ice, and then you can start to see how the lateral mentoring works. But the other way to really set about and ask for help is to let a person know, hey, I see you have a skill that I don't. Do you mind if I ask you some questions? Can I ask your opinion? Can I get some advice from you? That's different than saying, come and help me do something. If you are a little more subtle, it's an easier way to get a mentor.
Well, you're actually saying what you're looking to get from that conversation or from that relationship.
Yes. Yes. So if you say to someone, I don't know how to do some tech component of whatever it is for podcasting. Can I pick your brain? Can you help me out with this? That is a way that you can ask someone. So yeah, you do need to know what you're asking for.
So lateral mentoring is another way of saying asking someone for help.
Yes, it is. And most of us For most of us, asking for help is a throwaway. And it's the most powerful thing that we can have in our lives. It binds us to someone. We now have a connection with someone. And when somebody asks you for help, don't you want to help them? Most people say, yes, it makes me feel good. But the person asking often feels like I wouldn't want to burden someone when really people like helping.
So I'm just curious, are you finding that people in midlife are more willing to be a mentor?
Unbelievably, I have a wait list. I was told no one will want to volunteer their time. And they said, the people at the level that you're asking, that you think you're going to get mentors, they'll never want to do it. They're going to be way too busy. But we have somebody who flies off to Israel and then to other countries, and she runs the Malta conference. She dials in from wherever she is, and she makes the time. And they ask us. I don't ask them to be mentors. They ask us. It's amazing. In midlife, everybody really gets on the mentor train.
So like I so enjoyed Arthur Brooks's book From Strength to Strength. He talks about something similar of now is our time to give back, and it feels good to give back. It's not like only our responsibility to give to the next generation, but it's good. We feel good about doing it. So
Hmm.
while there is that balance a little bit of like you should be could and should be giving to other people, and maybe we don't need to be spending all the time for ourselves, whether it's making money and for our family, but keep finding that part of ourselves to be giving. I think it makes us more gives more meaning to life.
Absolutely.
And I think
Think,
that midlife is a lot about meaning. It's finding what really resonates with us.
yes. When you can make, when you can visualize an action becoming something that adds meaning to life, it adds meaning to you. If you can say, wow, I know that I'm going to impact my daughters-in-law or my grandchildren or people in the community or people that in the world, that isn't that a great feeling? Don't you feel almost bigger? You kind of feel like filled up. And that's what mentorship does. And that's what generativity does. So absolutely, Strength to Strength had the same idea. And that's from Eric Erickson. And that's part of having meaning in life.
Because I think that what we're talking about is like these finding meaning and finding being generative. I think that combination is what where mentorship really is, like the overlap of finding meaning in what we're doing, using our time and using who we are, the what we have built up till now, or what our passions are, or what our talents are. It's bringing the me to somebody else, and that's what makes it meaningful.
Oh, I like how you said that. Yeah. The me to someone else, making it meaningful. That's very true. That's exactly what it is. I couldn't have said it better.
Thank you. I've been thinking about this for a while because I feel like I do some mentoring. I wasn't quite as intentional. I think now that understanding where it fits into my, and like you said, that person, puts it into their schedule, I think makes it more meaningful. I think it makes it more meaningful, makes it more real.
Hmm.
And I think that when it's more real, it really impacts us for I think it's generative in itself. It's like we want to do more of it because it does do, and I just think the whole process of giving to others, not giving everything and not giving all of our time to others, but being reasonable about it. Because some people can give all their time, and I think that's wonderful. But let's not say that that's the ideal. You can also do paid work, and you can also do family time, and also should have some self-care time and self-time and all of that. But in our schedule to find some time to give to others. I love the idea of giving to others. I'm through volunteering, but I think more importantly, what works for me is the mentoring part, even more than volunteering. But I'm just using it as an example of cutting vegetables. There's lots of other ways to volunteer, but giving of myself, I think, is so much more meaningful. And I think we all have something that we can be giving.
There's not a person on the planet that doesn't have something to give. You're right.
And I think
Absolutely.
whether we can tune into what people have been asking us for, or what we've been getting compliments about, and then those are some of the things. Or we can tune into what our values are and what we would like to give over, as long as it doesn't come across as like, this is what you must do. But doesn't.
Yeah, that's not mentoring, as opposed to sort of pushing them.
So I think that's distinction. So because there are some people, when they think about their legacy, what they want their children to know, or what they want people to know, is like, what I want you to know. I want you to know. And I think that's not the best way to actually make an impact. Well, it makes an impact, but not a positive impact or a meaningful impact.
Right. That's definitely, there is a distinction with mentoring, and mentoring has to have a recipient. And if you're telling somebody, if a person's tuned out because they're not being, it's not a dialogue. Mentorship is a two-way street. So you can put stuff out there, but it has to land on someone. There's a mentee that has to be available to catch it. And so when we talk at people, then it isn't caught usually if the wall goes up.
So I see mentorship as a relationship.
Yes.
As like, there's two people who want to be in this relationship, two people who want to be learning with and from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that I found fascinating is Chip Conley's model of being a mentor and a learner at the same time. His story was that he came in to be a mentor for Airbnb, for I forget his name, Brian, and Airbnb, but he ended up learning so much from the Airbnb. He maybe provided some of the hospitality information, and they taught him tech. So I love
That
that.
was lateral mentoring.
So he was doing both.
Yeah, that was lateral mentoring. When you see it as two experts at the same level, then that's lateral. And that is the most powerful kind of mentoring. And in fact, it does have to be a relationship for that too.
And he said he was like 20 years older than the next guy. So he had that understanding of that balance of learning from somebody much younger than him. And there was so much to learn, especially with technology. And there's so much technology we can learn from the younger people who really spend time in it. Because that's what Airbnb was, the tech aspect, and he brought the hospitality aspect. But the idea of our mentors don't have to be older than us, especially as we get to midlife. Half of the population is younger than us.
You're right. And they can be most often they're around the same age as us. And it's because we're engaging in lateral mentoring.
But as we said, that in his instance, his lateral mentoring was 20 years younger than him.
Yeah, that can be too. Age really isn't the relevant component to mentoring. We have always thought it is, because we think of it as a highway, and there's somebody up top, they're the boss, and the person is trying to get up the ladder. That's how we think of it. And so we think of age naturally, somebody starting out and somebody who's been there 20 years, and that kind of a scenario. But usually the people even down at the bottom, they're asking their friends, oh, do you know how to do this? Do you know how to do that? I remember when I was first starting out in right after I got my PhD, one of my fellow classmates called me from her job, and she said, do you know how to do CAPAs? I remember you knew how to do that. I'm gonna get fired if I don't know, if somebody doesn't help me do CAPAs. Can you help me? I was able to help her, and she would have been fine, but she was able to then use that. That's what you do when you're young and starting out. You call upon anybody you know to help you out. And so we forget that. We discount that.
But another point that I'm also finding is that as we get to midlife, there's going to be younger people who know more than us in something, and the age shouldn't really be a difference. It shouldn't just factor.
Absolutely, it shouldn't be a difference. We should be thinking of mentoring as mentoring regardless. It's just that we're built to want to mentor in midlife. That's when we get an itch to give back. That's the only difference. But age is just, it doesn't matter otherwise. But we're just built at this age. By the time we're 50, we're built to want to give back.
I love that your organization provides the infrastructure for the mentor and the mentee, and you bring them together. But it could be at a much smaller scale as well. Just finding somebody, and we can just really figure it out. Or if you have something that you want to bring and you don't know who to bring it to, you can network. Eventually, maybe we can start another organization. If you know, because you work with astronauts and astrophysicists, which is not everybody.
Yes, I agree. But it's very hard if you are a kid in STEM to find somebody at that level. If you're not a person in Silicon Valley, if you're not a person who lives and knows people from NASA, that's who we are able to get these folks in front of. And that's the importance. Just like you are getting your word out to folks all around the country. So it's important.
Right. But it doesn't have to be something as big as a NASA. Like, I mean, most of us are not from NASA or
No,
astronauts or any of that. But we all have something. I think I want to stress that again. We all have something that we could bring to somebody.
okay.
And there's always something. It doesn't have to be something huge, but something that's meaningful to us. And I think that's really the key is like if you need help finding what's meaningful to you, then you can talk to somebody. But I think that figuring out where you can be generative, whether if you're ready for it or not, but at some point, like you said, most of us at midlife would like to give back in some way, in some hours, some time, and something of ourselves to others. I think that's such an important thing to actually become more intentional about figuring out what it is and how we're going to figure it into our lives. Because for me, I find the rewards of it is so wonderful. Like I love being part of someone's growth or as part of someone's living a better life. Now, some of us have that more than others, but I think we all have it. And so that's sort of what you were saying from the developmental spectrum is that we all get to that at some point, at some level, some more than others, but at some level, we all get to that by the time we're 50. Or
Every
60.
one of us gets there. Um, the only thing that people sometimes say is, I don't have an expertise. It's that they just don't know they have an expertise. We all overlook our expertise and look at everyone else because that's what, if we see somebody that has an expertise that we don't have, like you've said, astronaut, astrophysicist, I don't have those either. But I have things they don't have. And so do you, and so does everybody else. And those may seem subtle to you because you haven't because they're so second nature to you, but they're huge to other people, huge. So those can be things like how you organize things, how you structure your day, how you structure the way that you think about things. Those are things that you might say, hey, I do this every day. It's nothing. It is something. It's very much something.
For the person who needs to be organized, yeah.
Yes. I mean, Marie Kondo made a whole Netflix series off of organizing drawers. It became a big hit around the world. And a lot of people overlook the importance of those sorts of things, but they're not to be overlooked.
Right. So I think that everyone has something, whether it makes, think about it, journal about it, or however, talk to your friends about what it is, or really tune in. And then finding the person, I think once you really decide what you want to do, I think that finding the person or the people that you can mentor, I think will just kind of evolve. But of course, networking could help if that's really what you want to do.
Absolutely.
So
Well
I,
said.
I mean, I'm loving midlife. I find that there's so much to do and share with the people. And I'm finding that life could be so much more meaningful at this point. And it's just a wonderful time. And I love there's so much on your blog. Just remind us again the name of your blog.
The right side of 40. So you can find my blog, The Right Side of 40. I'm on Psychology Today with The Right Side of 40 as well. So truly being on the right side of 40, which is 40 and older, is a time where we can all feel really good about ourselves. And one way to really try to learn more about yourself is to ask someone, what do you see my strengths are? And you'll be surprised that people will have a lot to say. And you might say to yourself, oh, I didn't even realize that. So get into contact with people that you feel close with and ask them what your strengths are. They're going to tell you. And it usually is not awkward.
No, I don't think it's awkward. I think that, I mean, I recommend that to the people I work with also. And what people love is that they see how many people are saying the same thing about them.
Yeah.
And I think it's very reaffirming, like if you want to keep it as a list, but you also find that some people see different things about you. And I find like you see about you can actually think about the different relationships you have. Like some people can see your humor, but other people don't see your humor because it doesn't come up in the context of how you know them. But
Mhm.
a thread through all of that is you see that you have perseverance. Like most people can notice that about you. And it's just nice, it's reaffirming to hear that. But beside that, there's also, what do you think I can give? If you ask a question of like, what do you think that I could be giving to other people? You may get some interesting insights.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just find that it's just great conversation to have. I think that vulnerability in those conversations is another part of midlife. It's just being vulnerable, having really good conversations. And I think we're past worrying so much about what people think about us, or we have less of that worry. Can't say it's totally, for some people it's not totally gone, but less.
Yes, that's very true. Everything you said is true. It's all spot on. And this is a time when you're reaching out to say to somebody, "Hey, can you tell me a little bit about myself? I'm trying to learn what my strengths and weaknesses are." Or if you're just having a dialogue with somebody and you say, "Do you mind if I tell you what I see your strengths are?" People are usually receptive to that, and you don't have to start it as awkwardly and blunt as that, but you can get into a conversation. But those conversations help to make that relationship more meaningful, like you said, with vulnerability and sharing that. When we have shed all of our superficial relationships from when we were like 20 and younger, and we have a tighter knit group of more meaningful connections, you're allowing more meaningful connections in when you do that. You're deepening those connections, and it makes it even better. You have a network that really makes you feel strong and grounded when you're doing that.
And I think that's really important to actually allow ourselves to have those conversations, especially if you've never had those conversations. But it may be awkward in the beginning, but I feel like when we're vulnerable is when we can really shine and be ourselves, which can lead us to be having our most wonderful years and making it meaningful and finding what we're really passionate about. So I'm just really enjoying the midlife, and the people I speak to are mostly enjoying midlife. And we have to figure out the physical things a little bit sometimes, but there's trade-offs. I mean, anyway, we can't go backwards. So let's just really enjoy these years and maximize from these years. And there's so much, and there's so many more years. 50s is just many more years left to go. So I'm really looking forward to it. So thank you so much, Debbie. It's been a really great conversation, and we'll see where we go from here. So if any
Absolutely.
final thoughts where people can find you? You said you're on Psychology Today and you're on your blog. Do you have any other? Do you have your website?
Yeah, mentorproject.org. And my personal website is deborahheiser.com, which is DeborahHeiser.com. So you can find me there. Send a question. I'm always happy to answer anything, or reach out to Deborah and I will answer questions through her if you ever want to ask anything.
All right. Thank you so much, Debbie. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me on. It's a real pleasure, and keep doing what you're doing. You're making a difference.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me in another fascinating conversation about midlife. If you'd like to reach me, Devora Krasnianski, to talk about your midlife or anything else, you can reach me at jewishmidlife@gmail.com. You can also find us on our website, jewishmidlife.com, and follow us on Jewish Midlife on Instagram or Facebook, and join our conversations in our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Jewish Women Talk About Midlife. And share what we're doing with your friends and others in the midlife phase.